The mysterious case of prisoner X has caused a diplomatic storm in two countries and many questions remain unanswered. 2 nights ago, the ABC's Foreign Correspondent program reported on the death of 34-year-old Australian Ben Zygier in an Israeli prison in 2010. He was accused of espionage and treason, and it's understood the dual citizen was an agent of Mossad, Israel's notorious intelligence unit. But it's unclear why he was imprisoned, and in both countries, pressure's growing for an official explanation. Hayden Cooper reports.
An Australian man languishes in an Israeli prison. His identity is a secret. His alleged crime kept under wraps. It's a story of intrigue and espionage stretching from the Middle East to Melbourne. But it's a story that ends in suicide.
We didn't know anything about what happened to him, except that there were whispers about Mossad and there were whispers about him being in detention, and something went horribly wrong.
I try not to be too surprised about anything that happens in the Middle East, but yes, this has really shocked me.
Tuesday's Foreign Correspondent investigation prized open the mystery case of prisoner X, a man now understood to be an agent of Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency. A man also now believed to be Australian, Ben Zygier. It's created a political uproar in Israel.
Today, I call on the Attorney General to check once and for all, in a thorough manner, what happened, why this man died, and what were the circumstances of his imprisonment and death.
Obscure prisoners kill themselves. No one knows about their existence. How is this on par with a proper democracy, with a proper rule of law?
There is no doubt that if true, the matter must be looked into.
Ben Zygier comes from a prominent Jewish family in Melbourne. In the 1990s, he studied law at Monash University before moving to Israel in his 20s. He did military service and married. Henry Greener is a family friend who presents a Jewish program on Melbourne Community Television.
No one had ever done that before.
No. I think he matured beautifully. He was very happy. He was in a relationship and married and was having children, and so I thought everything was achy jake with Ben. You know, he seemed to be really happy living in Israel, loved being there, and was very involved. He had a social conscience, and I think to him it was very important to be living there because there were so many social issues going on in Israel.
After several years, the Australian returned home and for a period lived here in Caulfield. He went back to Monash to study an MBA, and by then, reports say he was already working for Mossad.
Hi, this is Richard Silverstein, author of Tikkun Olam. There's big news today.
From his home in Seattle, author and blogger Richard Silverstein has been following the case.
My understanding of what he was doing in Australia was he was going back a couple of times and getting new passports and different identities so that they could be used for other Mossad operations. He registered for an MBA at the Monash campus, and he was seen with Saudi students and Iranian students, so he might have been doing some recruiting on campus. That's, you know, a relatively mundane kind of activity, everyday activity that the Mossad engages in.
Ben Zygier soon returned to Israel. It was January 2010. For Mossad and for Australia-Israeli relations, a delicate time.
We will not be silent on this matter. It is a matter of deep concern.
Australian passports had been used by Mossad agents sent to assassinate Mamdouh al-Mabou, a senior Hamas official. Soon after, connected or not, Ben Zygier found himself in prison.
It's entirely possible he was involved in this operation in some capacity. It's also possible that the assassination itself may have turned him away from what the Mossad was doing, and you can't really rule anything out.
I think something went horribly wrong somewhere along the line in the beginning of 2010, where there is the passport issue, that the Dubai assassination that occurred, and apparently Ben was put under suspicion as one of the people who might have been involved in that whole affair.
Back in Canberra, it seems Australian spies were watching. ASIO had reportedly been investigating 3 Australian-Israeli citizens suspected of spying. And it was through the intelligence agencies that news of the jailing of Ben Zygier first reached Australian diplomats.
Could you just clarify where that advice came from?
It came through intelligence channels.
As Foreign Minister Bob Carr has sent mixed messages. First, saying Australia knew nothing about the prisoner before his death.
The Australian government was not informed of his detention by his family or by anyone else.
Then today it was revealed officials did know in February, 10 months before the Australian killed himself in prison.
With that in mind.
When information is received through intelligence channels, then obviously it doesn't find its way into your normal consular filing system. And so when we were checking our files, our consular files, there was not that particular relevant information. We've since, of course, pieced more of it together.
The Australian government specifically sought assurances from Israel that, 1, the individual's legal rights would be respected, 2, he had legal representation of his own choosing, and 3, the individual's family members had been notified of his arrest and detention, and 4, he was not being mistreated.
So what did Ben Zygier do that landed him in a high-security Israeli prison? Reports from the region suggest he was facing serious charges of espionage, of helping Israel's enemies.
If this was a betrayal of the state for financial reasons in which he was turned by another country's security intelligence services and went to work for another country for financial reasons or whatever the reasons, that would be one possibility. And the other possibility, which I'm a little more inclined to, is that there could have been a crisis of conscience of some kind. He might have been involved in activities that he found repellent, and he might have wanted to get out of the situation, or he might have wanted to blow the whistle on whatever he was engaged in.
I think it was a very personal thing where Ben did something and it wasn't well received by his superiors, and he went into jail for it. Unfortunately, he didn't come out alive.
In Israel, the Australian's detention and death have had virtually no coverage until now. The government's gag order preventing publication has been partially lifted. The court statement sheds some light on the case, but not much.
The inmate was registered under a false identity for security reasons, but his family was notified immediately upon his arrest. The President has submitted the case to the state's prosecutor's office to examine aspects of negligence.
In Tel Aviv, journalists are still restricted in their reporting.
I personally was told by one of his lawyers, he had a team of 3 lawyers, and then his wife hired a 4th lawyer for a second opinion. So that lawyer, Avigdor Feldman, told me that he visited him in his jail a day or 2 days before he killed himself, and he didn't find any disturbing indications that he would commit suicide. Ben alone was negotiating via his lawyers a plea bargaining with the authorities, but since he denied the charges against him, and we don't know what were the charges, therefore he considered the plea bargaining, but he denied the charges.
The mystery of this young man's death is slowly unravelling 3 long years after the saga began. But for those who knew Ben Zygier, the official story of this high-security suicide will always seem suspicious.
He would be the last person on earth that I would guess would take his own life, especially being in a high security prison where there are nothing to hang from. Very mysterious.